And a lot of choreography around how Budget Day is managed, Colette. And one person who knows a lot about that is somebody who was inside government for 5 years, the former Minister for Social Protection, now the spokesperson on finance, the Labour Party's Joan Burton. Joan, thank you for joining us this lunchtime on Live at 12. What are you expecting to see in this afternoon's budget, given the pressures on Pascal Donoghue to make provisions for Brexit?
Well, actually very little. I think most of it has been thoroughly leaked, and it's a question of whether we're told the only increase in social welfare is likely to be in the living alone allowance, and perhaps some very small other things, some small increases to the payments for children for people who are on social welfare. I actually think there's going to be an awful lot of shock if there's no increase in payments for people like carers, pensioners and people with long-term and severe disabilities.
Do you understand that, though, that although a minister might like to give money to all of those very vulnerable people, that there simply isn't the money in the coffers this time?
Well, I think they could have managed it so that there would be money in the coffers, because we did that in much more difficult times. I actually got the last increase in the living alone allowance, for instance, at a time when the country was in a very bad place. We actually did that. So, I mean, it's the job of government to try and ensure that people who are the most vulnerable, and I would say that's people, you know, long-term disabilities, people who are retired and living on the state pension, and people like carers. And it is the government's responsibility to ensure that people like that are looked after. Also, it would seem to me that if a hard Brexit of any kind emerges, that there will be an awful lot of pressure on food prices, because so much cheaper processed food is actually made in England and then shipped over to Ireland via the big supermarkets. So that's going to be a particular problem. So I hope the government will keep a flexible outlook.
One issue that the Labour Party has been pressing for some time is the idea of bringing the minimum wage closer to a living wage. It's going to be increased by 30 cents per hour today. That surely is something the Labour Party would welcome.
Yes, and I want to hear that welcome, that announcement today, that we would actually go through the €10 an hour mark and go on the recommendation of the Low Pay Commission, which I established when I was Taoiseach.
There are concerns about the time at which that would kick in.
Well, that's just mean and unfair. My view, and that's what I did when I was in social welfare, all the increases kicked in on the 1st of January, just as all the tax either decreases or tax charges.
So if this wage increase kicks in March, that's not something you'd welcome?
Well, I think it's just mean, and I think it's slightly shabby on the part of this government. None of them, I don't think, have ever been on the minimum wage. The kind of people who are on the minimum wage are very low-paid workers, women part-time workers, some migrants.
Okay, Joan Burton, thank you very much for joining us this lunchtime on Live at 12. We'll wait to see exactly whether that minimum wage increase does kick in March or whether it might be January. In the meantime, back to you in studio, Colette.